Hello and welcome to the People's View. My name is David Schoeneman. I'll be your host on this episode. Today is January 15th, 2020, a big news day. Got big news coming out of Washington with the House of Representatives voting finally to transmit articles of impeachment over to the U.S. Senate. We're going to talk about that today, as well as some local things too here in the state of New Hampshire, because as crazy as things are in Washington, there's some crazy stuff going on in Concord too. With me today are two colleagues who I've served with on various boards and committees, and I'm glad to have them with us here today.
Kevin Scully, former state rep from Ward 6 in Nashua.
Don LeBrun, I'm former state rep, former alderman, and now serving on the Board of Medicine.
Thank you both for coming in. Really appreciate that. So, Washington, D.C., crazy stuff happening. It's a long, drawn-out saga. This whole impeachment thing, travesty really, which started while Trump was still a candidate. Before the election in 2016, Democrats were pushing for an impeachment. And it just shows how partisan, how childish, how swamp-like Washington is. Mm-hmm. And so here today, finally we have this going over to the House. What's your take on this and this delay, and what do you think is going to happen in the Senate?
Well, if you're asking me, I think this is really the term travesty of justice, I think really applies here. When you look at what happened, there were charges brought by an anonymous person who still has yet to be identified, so Trump has yet to face his accuser. It was secondhand knowledge, and again, some behind-the-scenes work was done to change the whistleblower rules and regulations to allow this to happen. So these allegations were brought. It's amazing of how many people the Democrats trotted before their committee who weren't in the room to talk about this. So there was a lot of secondhand knowledge, which is no knowledge at all, innuendo that was cast. The Democrat committee would not allow Republicans to call their own witnesses. The president's lawyers were never allowed to cross-examine the people who were giving evidence against the president.
And now we have the House screaming, demanding a fair trial.
Which is, and now we have the House basically.
Can they define a fair trial?
Yeah,
Pelosi was asked, and she was unable to come up with a definition.
That's correct.
She was pressed on that.
Correct. But Pelosi has painted herself into a corner because now she's taking 3 senators off of the campaign trail to sit in on a trial.
Right.
So she's painted herself in a corner, and I think that's why she's hesitating and delaying on making decisions. She just, at this point, doesn't know quite which way to go.
I wonder, I saw one commentator, I didn't mean to cut you off, Kevin.
Go ahead.
We'll come back to talk.
No, I didn't either. Yes, I did.
I saw one commentator in the paper wrote an editorial. He said that, or maybe it was online, I'm not sure, but he was speculating that the idea was to pull Sanders off the campaign trail at a critical time for Iowa and New Hampshire, because the party establishment is favoring Biden. And so just like they manipulated Sanders out of the field to favor Clinton in 2016, looks like they're manipulating Sanders out of the field to favor Biden. That's an interesting take on the timing.
This whole thing now is turned political.
Oh, yeah.
It's one strategy after another, and they don't really seem to know which way they want to go.
They're going to go anywhere that they think they get any kind of a toehold. But I don't think they're finding a toehold.
They're hurting their own party.
Well, it is. I find it ironic for a couple of reasons. One, the charges that were brought in against the president are no charge at all. They're not. He committed no crimes. Those two things that they're accusing him of are not crimes, federal crimes. And also, Nancy Pelosi was withholding the articles of impeachment because she was trying to strong-arm the Senate, which has the sole power to try impeachment, and they set their own rules. So she, the Speaker of the House, was literally trying to tell the Senate what to do and how to do it, and she said she wasn't going to send them over until they started doing things her way. Wow.
Yeah,
what chutzpah.
Right. What chutzpah. And, she also claimed this was an existential threat. I don't know if she used that term. Certainly some of the Democrats did. This is a threat. It's a crisis. It's time critical. And then they sat on it for a month. So clearly it's not.
And that's where the political strategy came in.
Right.
She didn't know what to do. She couldn't passed the charges forward because she wasn't sure exactly what she had to do party-wise, political-wise, in order to protect the people running for president.
Well, it may be an existential threat to her and some of the people in Washington, because interestingly enough, you've been hearing about Hunter Biden being on that board of Burisma, the Ukrainian oil company. Well, guess what? Her son was on one of those boards too.
Oh, really?
Ukraine and the Ukraine. Oh, yes.
I did not know that.
It's amazing to think. What I really find ironic is the fact that the Democrat Party is so against oil and gas, and all of their kids are sitting on oil boards in the Ukraine. So I think part of what this is all about was they're afraid that if we really do start digging and the Ukraine does its own independent investigations, the dirt that's going to be uncovered here, including Nancy Pelosi's own family.
Well, I hope that this stuff is uncovered. I'm all about truth in politics. One of the most frustrating things is how twisted, how manipulated the truth is. Even on our Board of Aldermen, Don, with the administration that is currently there, how things are twisted, how mobs are manipulated, how people are manipulated for the sake of taking more tax dollars. It's just terrible. It's terrible. Very, very cynical view. It's hard to have anything but a cynical view on this stuff. So I'm hoping that some of this corruption is uncovered. And frankly, when President Trump rightly criticizes a foreign country that we're giving money to for corruption. I mean, this is taxpayer money. It's our money that's going there. This money should be spent, used wisely. It should further American interests. We don't want to put it to some other country that it's lining some corrupt politicians' pockets. And how are we able to take the moral high ground and demand that Ukraine clean up their corruption if it turns out that these are Americans who are part of the corrupt establishment in these countries? And now, so I think it's a completely legitimate question to be looking at Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. It's just a coincidence that he's running for office now. But if he wasn't running for office, he should still be looked at.
Well, I guess the strategy is, if you think there are going to be federal charges filed against you, file for political office and claim that it's a political prosecution.
That's your immunity.
That's your immunity, right? I'm immune because I'm a politician. It should be just the opposite. Politicians should be held to a higher standard.
Yes.
Of right and
that
wrong.
whole Ukraine thing was a political football game. Is more or less what it was. What happened is Congress appropriated the money. Okay, you can appropriate money, but if you're loaning money or giving money to someone, you have a right to know what they're going to use it for, and if they're going to use it properly in your best interest. It's the same as if I loaned you $100, and I'd say to you, what do you want it for? Obviously, I mean, that's common sense. And that's exactly what happened, and he held the money till he found out what they were going to do with it.
Right. If we were actually given billions of dollars to foreign countries without any expectation of behavior to get that money, I'd want them impeached for that.
Sure, exactly.
You're right.
Don't give them the money. If there's not some idea that this somehow benefits America, what are we doing it for? Frankly, what are we doing it for anyway?
That's what foreign aid is all about. It's supposed to benefit us.
Yeah. I mean, the definition, I think, of foreign policy is quid pro quo.
It is.
We do this for you. You do this for us.
It is.
Which means you don't do that for our enemy over there. You don't give them the bases. You give us the bases. Or you give us this to us or whatever.
I do want to point one other thing. So the Democrats are accusing Trump of using the power of office to go after a political enemy. What did Barack Obama do when he had the FBI wiretapping candidate Trump? Did you get the articles of impeachment from the Democrat-controlled House against Obama for doing the exact same thing?
Of course not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Enough said.
It is.
They've all done the same thing. Every president has done it in some way or another.
It is pure politics.
Sure it is.
And, I can't object to that, I suppose. But I certainly think the Senate is going to do what they're mandated to do, to listen to both sides. They'll call witnesses or not as they establish their rules. And then in the end, I think President Trump is going to be exonerated.
They're baseless charges. I don't see the Senate really accepting the charges and feeling that the charges have any merit. And I think that's as far as it's going to go.
So you think it's going to be an acquittal?
Yeah.
I think the charges should be dismissed as soon as they're formally transmitted. Because if they're not...
But dismiss doesn't cut the mustard. It's got to be acquittal.
Well, I guess then let's have an immediate vote for acquittal, because if they don't do that, the House, and they've already threatened to do this, is to have perpetual impeachment hearings against the president. They can throw those charges into the Senate and literally control the activity of the Senate, because the Senate has to dance to the impeachment charges that the House is putting in there. So they're taking over the agenda of the Senate, so they can't spend time doing the things that they ought to be doing. So the Senate ought to say, thank you very much, we're done. You don't get to tell us what to do and how
Well, I
else to
certainly
do
hope
it.
that's one of these outcomes, because the government is supposed to be taking care of the people's business, and Washington is not doing that.
They're not doing it now.
They're not doing
They
it
haven't
at
done
all.
it for,
They haven't done
for the
it for
entire
these
year.
2.5 years since Trump has been in.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a speedy dispatch to this whole thing, and frankly, I hope that the House...
Get on with the people's
Yes,
business, and that's
that's
what
right.
the American people want. They've shown that, and the polls show that the American people are sick and tired of this.
Well,
Yes.
I have to tell you, we need to vote the two congressmen we have and senator out.
Yes.
Because they are not doing the people's business.
Yeah.
That's been very, very clear.
Very, very clear, every
And if-
step of the way.
and if I wanna put
they've only
Pappas
done
has
partisan.
voted with Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time already.
Right. So San Francisco
And
is
that's
running
almost
New Hampshire.
impossible if you've got any mind of your own.
Yeah.
San Francisco is running New Hampshire right now.
As if we want to be like San Francisco. Maybe there are some here who do, but I don't. San Francisco's a mess. Nancy Pelosi's district is a mess.
It's a total mess.
Yeah.
It's a mess, and we don't want to import that stuff here.
No.
So we talked in the opening part of the show about how crazy things are in Washington. We've been touching on some of this stuff now, but there's also stuff going on in Concord. And a lot of partisan politics right here. One of the things that we've touched on in the past is reform to voter laws or voter fraud, trying to get fraud out of the picture. And frankly, fraud, by the way, is not someone voting in two different jurisdictions, I don't think. I think it's someone voting in the wrong jurisdiction.
Yes.
And that's what's happened. We have Massachusetts people who don't vote in Massachusetts because they know it doesn't matter, come up here to vote. And I've stood at those polls, and I've seen the mass plates
That's
come
how
in. I haven't seen the buses. You know, people say, well, they're bringing them in buses. Maybe they are. I have not seen that. What I've seen, though, standing at the polls, as you both have, many days in the past, I've seen a lot of mass plates on cars
Sure.
come in and go in and vote. Now, did they all just move here that day? I don't think so.
But the reason they do it is because you always see so many mass plates in New Hampshire. They're always here every day. So you don't really, you look at it at the polls and you don't really think, well, maybe that person does live here.
Well, you could say the thing I consider to be voter fraud is actually legal in New Hampshire, and that is college students declaring that they are going to become residents of New Hampshire, signing up with that same-day voting thing, when they really have no intention of becoming New Hampshire residents at all. And I believe the same-day registrations in our three biggest college towns in this last presidential election was about 6,000. The ratio of voting Democrat to Republican in those college towns is probably about 90 to 10. So if you look at that, you're going to say, all right, so the Democrat Party convinced 6,000 college students to vote, declare that they're going to live in New Hampshire and vote here. Hillary Clinton won New Hampshire by 2,500 votes. Kelly Ayotte lost her Senate seat by 1,500 votes, well within the margin of those
Well within the
same-day
margin.
registrations
That's right.
of college students
That's right.
who were encouraged to do that. Now, again, what we've been doing is you're supposed to follow up, right? We're sending out letters saying, hey, you said you were going to live here. Where are you now? All these letters are coming back, address, undeliverable, address
Right.
unknown.
Right.
The people aren't registering their cars to
They got
you know,
something like
right.
18% of the letters back,
Yeah.
something
18.
like that.
Yeah, so when you look at what's happening here, it's quite clear that people who are saying they're going to live here aren't really doing that in good faith.
Right, they're not. They're doing it solely to influence a
Influence the
swing
election.
state.
Yeah.
New Hampshire with the First in the Nation primary is a big deal. People have their eyes on New Hampshire. It's one of the first states where polling closes, and so on election day, they're announcing nationally, the polls are closed, exit polls, all this stuff for New Hampshire, which is great for us, but it makes us a target and very ripe for manipulation and fraud.
Right.
And when you were in the House, and when you guys were both in the House, you passed some legislation, helped pass some legislation that reformed some of these things.
We were tightening up the requirements and making it very clear to people who were, if they were going to say that they were going to live here, you better damn well mean it, because we're going to follow up. And we were putting some teeth in the situation where it became very clear that people were, again, from my perspective, registering falsely.
Right. And the Democrats aren't happy about you putting teeth in those laws. In fact,
no.
we've found out that they're trying to withhold funds now. Again, a partisan manipulation of existing law right here in Concord, trying to prevent the Attorney General's office from defending these new laws.
Yes. Yes.
What's going on?
Well, the Attorney General, and I guess, as you had said, the Attorney General's office routinely goes before the Fiscal Committee, which is comprised of both the House and the Senate, right, to ask for funding for certain things. So now, here's the irony. Lawsuits have been brought against the state of New Hampshire regarding these two reform bills to make sure that we didn't have wholesale voter fraud. And they were opposed by the Democrats. The Democrats got their minion, the ACLU, to file suit against the state. So the state, our Attorney General's office, went before the Fiscal Committee, which is controlled by the Democrat Party, and said, listen, we have these suits being brought against us. We need money to be able to defend them. And the Fiscal Committee said, no,
Well,
you're not getting any money.
Yeah, they didn't say completely no. They had asked, the request was for $700,000, and they appropriated $300,000.
Now, was the $700,000 just for these particular cases,
No.
or for all of their
that was
business?
that was for the AG's office.
All right, for the Attorney General's office, $700,000. But a big part of what they're doing now is going to be attempting to defend
defending these
against
two.
these suits brought by the ACLU, which is taking a position that is favorable and mirrors the Democrats who don't like these laws. So the
That's
Democrats
correct.
don't like these laws. They get their minions, ACLU, to file suit. Then Attorney General has to defend the suits for the state. So they go to the Fiscal Committee to get money to defend these suits, and the Democrats who don't like the laws in the first place say, sorry, you can't have the money.
But there's another part to that. You got to realize that the ACLU gets money from the federal government for every suit they file.
No wonder we're in such trouble.
So they go out looking for suits to file.
You know, Trump said he was going to drain the swamp. I give him a lot of credit for even trying to undertake that. But as he does that, as we start to look at these things and see how bad things are, you realize how big and deep the swamp really is. Just like here in Nashua, the things that we've seen.
You got a swamp here.
We got a swamp here.
Yeah.
We have a swamp here.
Right.
So now what's going to happen with these cases?
What is the richest city in the world?
New York?
Washington, D.C. What is the least productive city in the world?
Let me guess, Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. That sums it up. That's
Yeah.
the swamp.
That's the swamp. But the swamp, you know, it reaches out. It's here in Concord too.
Oh,
And for us to be having these
it's all over
laws,
politics.
people want. It's all politics, partisan politics. So Democrats are trying very hard, especially 2020 being an election year. They want very much for those same college kids or college kids like them to swing the way New Hampshire votes for the president this year, and for Congress and for Senate, for everything else. As you said, the races we've had in the past, where particularly Senator Ayotte's race, where she lost by a margin that's within the same-day registration. Same-day registration is such a scam.
Yes.
It's such a scam. The Democrats are pushing the scam on us. It's a scam.
But you know, that goes within the voting system also, at the polls. Because I had an incident where the moderator would not shut the polls down at 8 o'clock. She left them open. People came in, and the person running the same day registration wanted to allow them to go ahead and register and vote. After 8 o'clock, this was like 20 after 8:30, something like that.
So what happened?
There happened to be a Republican attorney in the polling place. I went and got him. He had to go to the moderator to get the doors locked and had to tell the same-day registration individual that she couldn't register those people, that they entered after 8 o'clock.
You know, we do have laws. I think it's great that people should be able to vote. That's how our system works. We're not a democracy, by the way. We're a republic. But still, people do vote, and they have the right to vote. But they don't have the right to vote for for any reason whatsoever. There are certain laws
They don't have
that,
the right to break the rules.
they don't have a right to break the rules. There are certain laws that dictate how this works. And one of those laws is the polls open at this time and close at this time.
Right.
That's just the way it's done.
And the moderators, the rules the moderator has to follow is she has to announce at 8 o'clock, she has to be at the door and announce polls are closed and lock the door. And at that point, the same day registrant is finished. She's done. She can get up and go home if she wants.
Which ward was that, Don?
5,
And what year was that?
16,
16.
16.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
So it exists. All right. So we'll see. We've got to follow that one closely.
So all sorts of angles that create fraud.
Yeah.
All sorts.
And there is a lot of fraud. But again, it's not the fraud of people voting in two jurisdictions.
And the thing is, these people
caught a few
could have been favorable to the Republicans. They
Right.
could have been favorable to the Democrats. That doesn't matter.
Right. It doesn't.
What matters is the rules are set forth that at 8 o'clock everything ceases.
Right. Right. And the rules also say that you need to be domiciled or registered. Somehow
Right.
you have to have some kind of residence here. And
Right.
I'm probably not using the right terms. The law spells out the right terms.
Yes.
But we have to have people that are living here, invested in New Hampshire, not just for a few years in college, but invested in New Hampshire, voting here. Because
right.
it dictates what happens in the
right.
state. Not only the state, it has a lot to do with what happens
Let's
in the
be
nation.
fair to everybody. Everybody vote once, vote where you're supposed to
Vote
vote.
where you're supposed to. That's key.
Yeah. And at the end, count up the votes, and whoever wins, wins.
Look at
If
your
it's a
driver's
Democrat,
license.
fine.
Right. You tell me where you're supposed to vote.
Yeah.
Look at your driver's license.
Yeah.
Look
I
at your
mean, I
driver's
would
license.
point out, I mean, I don't think the Democrats saw Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, or Michigan happening. So if
Probably
they
didn't,
had
yeah.
voted, as they traditionally had, and those states swung to the Democrats, New Hampshire would have been, I think, the difference. So they had a strategy in place, and had those other states not swung in a different direction, Hillary Clinton would be president today, and I would be pointing to those college kids saying they were the difference and decider of the president of the United States. Don't want that happening.
No, we don't want that happening. That's wrong. We got a few minutes left. Let's touch on something else real quick, and that is a sales tax. Again, these guys, and now that in this case, it's a Democrat rep from the city of Nashua
Yes.
who is trying to enact a sales tax here in New Hampshire.
Was also an alderman, which I
Also
find
an alderman, yes.
So Skip Cleaver.
Skip Cleaver,
And the
right.
co-sponsors, Mark King, who's from my Ward 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell you, I actually wrote an article, which you can read on the Granite Grok if you're interested.
Okay.
And it's called, If You Tax It, They Won't Come. And it's a little bit of a play on that Field of Dreams movie.
Sure.
But the idea is that people get in their car and drive up from Massachusetts because we are tax-free.
Right.
As soon as you impose any type of sales tax on, in this case, this was sales tax on electronic items, which are the reasons why people come up here: laptops, big screen TVs,
Grocery
cell
shopping,
phones.
too.
You know, they were going to put that on there. All of a sudden, people don't get in their cars anymore.
Right.
Now, if you live in Concord, in the middle of the state, it's not going to make a difference in some respects. You'll grumble, but the local merchants are still going to get their business. We are literally built on the concept of being tax-free, our local New Hampshire, Nashua economy, and the idea that probably 50% of the traffic through those stores are people coming up from Massachusetts.
My understanding is that Nashua is the largest contributor to tax revenues for the state. Is that true? Certainly one of the largest.
I'm not sure of that. don't
But I
know.
do know, yes. But in terms of the property tax, the business tax,
So what that
all of
means
this-
is if we lose that cross-state business, then it's not just Nashua losing, but it's New Hampshire's losing.
the entire southern tier, all of the communities along the southern tier, including Salem, is another big shopping mecca, are going to be devastated, right?
Right.
And that will mean less business taxes. By the way, when people don't come up to shop, they don't eat here.
Right.
So they go to the restaurants. They don't go
They
to
don't
the
buy the
gas
gas.
stations.
That's right.
I mean, you can start going down the list, and it
Sure.
doesn't take you very long to say to yourself, oh my God, this is a terrible idea for New Hampshire in general and Nashua in particular. Oh man.
Well, I can only predict that the Democrats in the House and the Senate here in Concord are going to pass this. And I certainly hope that Governor Sununu will
The
veto
Democrats
it.
are going to pass it. Oh, he'll veto.
I'm sure that he will.
Oh, yeah.
He has to. He's the
they
only guy
can't
who's standing
overturn his
between us
veto.
and this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But I gotta believe that the Democrats are going to pass this.
Well, I'd like to think that the mayor, Mayor Johnchess, would be telling his local reps, he does talk to them and ask them to get things passed in order to bring more money in here. This is going to be devastating to the Nashua
be
business base.
Surprised if he was not in favor of this.
Well, then shame on him, because I have to tell you, everybody's going to suffer. Because when those doors close, you're
Right.
going to have more unemployment, and you're going to have a lower business base to pay in terms of property taxes to Nashua. Guess what? The cost of government's not going to go down. Who's going to pick up the difference?
Residents.
We are.
We are. Yeah,
Right.
homeowner tax. Already we have
The same place they always go to.
yeah, to the homeowner, not to the business, because the businesses
Yeah,
are
to the
shrinking.
homeowner.
So it's going to come to the homeowners, and that's a big problem.
Terrible.
We have to see
Terrible
what happens
idea.
with that. One last story. We got about a minute. We can touch on it briefly. I saw that in the paper today in the Union Leader, and Don, we mentioned it before the show. Protecting women's sports.
Right.
What's going on with women's sports? When
This-
you were in the House, you talked about this too.
Yeah, I was going to, if I had run again, I was going to submit a bill to protect transgenders entering into sports and really just watering the sport down to where it was not even competitive anymore.
Because someone who is born male, even if they're transgender, they have bone structure and musculature and all that sort of
Yes,
stuff, which
yes.
is different from a woman who's born a woman.
Right, right.
And that makes him, or her in this case, her more competitive.
Right.
in
And it
that
weakens the
arena
game
than-
overall.
It weakens the game overall.
Yeah.
And it weakens it for women's sports.
Yes. So what has happened since I didn't file the bill, representative by the name of Mark Pearson has filed it. My bill would have gone further. It would have protected men's sports as well as women's sports. This bill just protects women's sports.
Well, there's no point in having men's and women's sports. We have a differentiation because of the different structure our
Right.
bodies have.
We can't even call it men's and women's
You
sports
really
anymore.
can't. So we're really there's no longer any men's and women's sports.
That's
Perhaps
right.
that's going to be
just
the
like the
outcome.
bathrooms.
We'll see what happens with that in Concord as well.
Yeah.
All right. I want to thank you both for coming in. Our time is up. Thank you very, very much. We'll follow some of these stories.
Thank you, David.
I want to
Okay.
thank you, too, at home for tuning in and watching The People's View. I'm David Schoeneman, your host on the show today, and my two colleagues here. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.